Hello friends and welcome to Sleep Bedtime Stories. My name is Shresht and today we're diving into a story that sounds too incredible to be true. The unbelievable tale of a teenage boy who became one of America's most elusive criminal legends. This is the story of a 14-year-old who outsmarted the police, the FBI, and an entire nation. A boy who, without a single lesson, learned to fly planes just by reading manuals, and then stole them for joyrides. He was a ghost, a phantom thief who slipped through the fingers of every authority that chased him. They called him the Barefoot Bandit. And this is the astonishing story of Colton Harris-Moore. Our story begins not with a crime, but with a childhood of hardship. Colton was born on Camano Island in Washington state. His life was difficult from the very start. On one side, his mother struggled with alcohol. On the other, his father was addicted to drugs. The constant fighting led to a bitter divorce. After the split, Colton's father left, providing no money and no support. Colton's situation grew worse. He and his mother lived in deep poverty. Lost in her addiction, she often neglected him. Young Colton frequently went to bed hungry, his stomach aching from lack of food. Tired of his desperate situation, he made a fateful decision. He would start stealing. Colton began targeting local stores and supermarkets, taking food to survive. But he was young and inexperienced. He was quickly caught and sent to a juvenile detention center. When the police tried to speak with his mother about the situation, she refused to meet them. She claimed she had nothing to do with him. This rejection cut Colton deeply. It left a profound and lasting scar on his young mind. At that very moment he decided he would run away from home for good. Now living on his own, Colton started targeting houses. He looked for homes that were either empty or whose owners were away on holiday. He would slip inside and his first stop was always the refrigerator. He would take out food, eat until he was full and then watch television. He would even relax on the couch. For Colton, these empty houses provided a sense of comfort and relaxation he had always longed for. He often began spending several nights in the same house. Before leaving, he would take valuables like cash, jewelry, and electronic devices. He also took food from the fridge to erase his hunger. Colton had a principle. He would only steal things that the homeowners could claim on insurance so they wouldn't suffer a direct loss. With the money from these thefts, Colton bought a tent. Now he would either spend the night in empty houses, or set up his tent deep in the forest. Since he moved around constantly with his tent, he felt a constant weight on his shoulders. He eventually found a secluded spot in the forest, pitched his tent and settled into a routine. He would spend his days in empty houses, and his nights sleeping in his forest tent. Slowly he began collecting all his looted goods, cash and everything else he needed inside that tent. Colton lived like this for several months, often changing his location within the dense forest to avoid detection. Meanwhile, the police were receiving a continuous stream of burglary complaints. They filed a report and began searching for an unknown thief. After a few days of investigation, they discovered fingerprints left at the scenes. Because Colton had been caught stealing from a supermarket as a juvenile, his fingerprints were already in the police database. As soon as the police matched the crime scene prints, they found a perfect match for Colton Harris-Moore. Now the police had Colton's photo and fingerprints. But catching him was becoming a major challenge. They began circulating his photo everywhere, from newspapers to TV channels and on wanted posters. People started to recognize Colton. But he kept working, using disguises and stealing what he needed. He was now 15 years old. Then in 2007 he was caught again, this time stealing a parcel from a doorstep. The homeowner reported the theft, and Colton was arrested and sent back to the juvenile detention center. Back in the detention center, Colton showed a new side. He began working on self-improvement. He read a vast number of books and started making sketch drawings. It was during this time that his interest in airplanes began to grow exponentially. He started sketching many different airplanes. He even began participating in classes within the jail. Everyone started to believe he was changing for the better. Colton often told his jail supervisor that he planned to go to university and complete his studies after his release. But this was all a clever trick. A vicious deception that would later prove successful. After spending 10 months in the detention center, he was transferred to a child care home due to his good behavior. Although this home was less strict than the detention center, it was still guarded by 2 security officers. Colton watched their movements carefully. One night, he gathered all his belongings, slipped them out of a window and escaped from the child care home. Colton was once again a free man. For about a year, Colton supported himself with small jobs, but he soon returned to a life of theft, living more comfortably than before. It was now 2009, and Colton was 17 years old. He set up his tent once more in a dense forest and resumed robbing houses and stores. His skills were now far more advanced. He could scale any wall and climb any pipe with ease. He could easily enter a house through a second-story window. One day the police spotted him and gave chase. Colton managed to hide in a car park, evading capture once again. The police were determined to catch him at any cost. They launched a massive search operation across the entire forest. As evening fell, they discovered a completely wrecked car. It was the same car Colton had been driving. Upon investigation, the police realized Colton had fled into the dense woods. Once more he had slipped through their fingers. Colton's repeated escapes from the police boosted his confidence to a dangerous level. He crossed a new line, stealing a police car itself, and even a rifle from inside it. The theft of the expensive rifle sent shockwaves through the entire police department. They began to fear that Colton might now be willing to take a life. A massive search operation was launched across Kamano Island. The police used helicopters and trained dogs. The FBI even got involved, taking over the reins of the investigation and offering a $1,000 reward for his capture. But Colton was planning something no one could have ever imagined. As I mentioned earlier, his interest in aviation had grown immensely while he was in detention. After his escape, he had bought an aviation manual, a book that explained everything about airplanes. He read this manual obsessively. He also started playing flight simulation games like Microsoft Flight Simulator. After playing for a while, he began monitoring the local airport and its runways. This airport was mostly used by people with private planes. While keeping an eye on the airport, Colton would sneak into the hangars and steal the user manuals for the planes. After reading these manuals for a few weeks, Colton began to feel confident. He believed he now had enough information to fly a plane. He made a decision. He would steal a plane from that very airport. One night, Colton moved through the bushes along the runway and reached a hangar where the planes were kept. He broke the door lock, went inside and pulled one of the planes out onto the runway. The days of reading aviation and user manuals paid off. It was now easy for him to handle the aircraft. In just a short time he had the plane flying. Colton took the aircraft to an altitude of about 18,000 feet to avoid radar detection. The air traffic controllers were completely unaware that a 17-year-old boy with no training had just stolen a plane and was flying it through the air. Flying a plane was Colton's dream, and he was so excited that he didn't pay attention to one critical detail: the fuel gauge. The low fuel alarm began to blare inside the cockpit. Colton panicked. His most important task now was to land the plane safely. While he had managed to take off easily, landing was a different challenge. He couldn't find a suitable place to land. Then he spotted an empty, flat area near a forest. He tried to land the plane there. As the plane touched down, it swayed violently, swerved, and collided with a tree. Astonishingly, Colton survived the crash with only minor scratches and injuries. He fled from the wreckage and disappeared back into the forest. When the police received news of the plane theft, they were baffled. They initially suspected drug smugglers were behind it, thinking the plane was to be used for smuggling. They had no idea Colton was responsible. Meanwhile, the police were still searching for Colton in connection with his escape from the child care home. During their search, they came upon his tent in the forest. As soon as Colton saw people approaching, he ran out and escaped. The police searched the tent and found aviation manuals and plane user manuals inside. Along with the stolen plane's photo, which was now all over the news, the police quickly realized Colton was the one behind the incredible theft. They were stunned. How could a 17-year-old boy who had never sat in a plane before possibly fly one? Unfazed, Colton stole another plane from a different island, about 37 miles away. After landing, he went to a supermarket. His eyes fell on an ATM machine. He noticed a forklift truck parked nearby. He got into the forklift, drove it straight into the ATM, and hit it with such force that the machine split in two. He took the money inside and escaped. Colton carried out these thefts fearlessly. He was completely oblivious to the fact that his fingerprints and image from surveillance cameras were being recorded everywhere. His photo was now constantly in the news. Because he often committed crimes barefoot, he was given the name, the Barefoot Bandit. The name Barefoot Bandit became so famous that fans started making pages dedicated to him. People even began creating graffiti art on walls, dedicated to him. Colton started to enjoy this growing fame. To please his fans, he started leaving drawings of bare feet at the scenes of his crimes. This became his signature. As soon as he realized the police and FBI were closing in on this island, he decided to run away. Since the police were watching all the airports closely, he chose a different route. He stole a boat and set off for Canada. The most shocking part was that he wasn't spotted by any Coast Guard on his way, and he reached Canada easily. In Canada, he met two people and became good friends with them. They had no idea he was a wanted fugitive. A few days later, they had a fight and parted ways. When the two friends later saw Colton's picture in the newspaper, they were stunned. Colton stole another boat and sailed back to America. Once there, he started stealing cars. This time he was very careful. He didn't steal the cars he used for gas, and as soon as a car ran out of fuel, he would abandon it and steal another. He continued stealing cars until he reached a local airport. There, for the fourth time, Colton stole a plane. He flew it to the city of Washington. Near the city of Granite Falls, he spotted a vacant piece of land and decided to land there. As he brought the plane down, he saw that the land was strewn with severed tree stumps, protruding just a little from the ground. But it was too late for Colton to react. The plane landed and crashed violently into the stumps. Yet again, fate was on his side. He survived the crash with only light injuries and ran into the forest. People in the area witnessed the plane crash and saw a boy running from the wreckage. One man immediately informed the police. The news reached the police and FBI, who quickly arrived at the scene. They surrounded the jungle and began searching with helicopters. They sealed off all the surrounding checkpoints to prevent his escape. A call came into the police station from a local family living near the forest. They reported seeing a boy hiding in the trees near their house, and they suspected it was the same boy from the news. The police rushed to the location and began searching, but Colton had already escaped, leaving all his belongings behind. The police seized his bag, which contained hundreds of dollars in cash, and a camera filled with Colton's selfies. Despite a massive search operation involving all forces, the police and FBI failed to capture Colton. Colton then stole a fifth plane from another island in Washington and flew it, landing easily this time without damaging the plane. After committing a few thefts on this island, Colton decided to lay low for a few months and disappear from the public eye. His sudden disappearance made his fans and the police believe he might be dead. It was unlike him to go so long without stealing. But a few days later he surprised everyone. A boat went missing from a port, and his signature barefoot drawing was found nearby. It was clear that Colton was back. He had taken the boat to another island, Lopez Island. From there, he stole another boat and sailed back home to Camano Island. The frequent thefts had made the people of Camano Island resent him. They held meetings to discuss how to help the police catch him. The police increased their patrols with trained dogs, day and night. Private airport owners started spending nights in their hangars to protect their planes. Colton was the talk of the entire island. Everyone wanted him caught. After arriving on Camano Island, Colton stole a car and drove to another city. In a surprising act of kindness, he once stopped his car outside an animal shelter. He left an envelope containing $100 and a note. The note read, "I stayed here and I had some extra money. Please use these funds to care for the animals." He signed the note with his signature, the Barefoot Bandit. He then decided to leave Washington for good. He traveled from one state to another, covering over 2,000 miles and stealing several more cars. No one in America, from the police to the FBI, knew where Colton was. He finally arrived at an airport in Bloomington, Indiana. Hiding behind trees, he watched the planes, waiting for the right opportunity. As soon as he saw a pilot leave a plane's door open and walk away, Colton immediately climbed inside and flew away. He flew the plane all the way to the Bahamas. Colton's plane was seen circling repeatedly over the Bahamas. He couldn't find a suitable place to land. Finally, he spotted a flat piece of land and managed to land the plane quite easily. After landing, he ran towards the forests. The Bahamian police were alerted and began an investigation. They discovered it was an American plane and immediately informed the American authorities, who suspected Colton was involved. The news spread like wildfire across the Bahamas, and every news channel began reporting on Colton. Without wasting any time, Colton started stealing again. He targeted a restaurant and a department store, taking cash, food, and other items he needed. After these thefts, he set up his tent in a forest once more. He went to the beach, swam, and walked around like a tourist on vacation. A few days later, he stole a car and drove to a major city on the island. At the city's port, he began watching the boats. He saw a boat owner leave his keys in the car and go into a restaurant. Colton broke the car's window, took the boat keys, started the engine, and sped away. He sailed to a second island in the Bahamas called Eleuthera. There, he tried his best to stay out of sight as his photo was all over the news and on wanted posters on TV. People were starting to recognize him. After a few days, he stole another boat. But this time he made a foolish mistake. He drew attention to himself by showing off. He noticed two boys on the shore watching him, and he began performing stunts in the water with the boat. The boys seemed impressed. Colton brought the boat closer to them and said, "You don't know who I am? My name is Colton. I'm the Barefoot Bandit." One of the boys immediately recognized him, knowing there was a large reward for his capture. The boy pretended not to recognize him and started a conversation to keep him there, while secretly signaling his friend. His friend called for backup, and soon more people arrived in another boat. The two boys joined them, and now 6 people in one boat began chasing Colton. Colton's boat was fast, but the pursuers had a speedboat and quickly closed the distance. One of the men in the chasing boat pulled out a gun and aimed at Colton. But Colton was an expert at handling a boat. He swerved sharply, causing a huge wave to splash over the pursuers' boat, soaking them and causing the driver to lose control momentarily. This allowed Colton to escape. He reached a shore where there was a large, palace-like house with a security guard. The guard had been watching the entire chase. The 6 pursuers were screaming and one of them had fired a gun. The guard, thinking of calling the police, saw Colton approaching the shore. Colton beached the boat, jumped out, and ran into some bushes. The security guard gave chase but lost him in the foliage. The guard immediately called the local police commander and reported seeing the boy near the house's garden. The police commander quickly alerted the area and the port. The police surrounded the entire region and began a slow, methodical search. Meanwhile, Colton silently slipped into the water at the port and swam to a nearby boat. He climbed aboard. The police and onlookers saw the boat start to move slowly. Its headlight was very dim, and it moved so slowly that the people on the dock were confused, wondering how the boat was moving on its own. Suddenly, Colton accelerated and sped away. The police realized too late that Colton was escaping. They had no police boats ready at that moment. The people on the dock offered their private boats to the police, who immediately gave chase. But Colton had a good head start. He kept looking back to see how close the police were. Suddenly, his boat collided with a small sandbar and got stuck. Despite repeated attempts, he couldn't free the boat. The police surrounded him. Then something unbelievable happened. Seeing himself surrounded on all sides, Colton took out a gun and held it to his own head. The police were stunned. Colton started shouting, trying to distract them. With one hand he held the gun to his head, and with the other he worked the steering, trying to free the boat. Then suddenly Colton hit the accelerator hard and turned the steering wheel. The boat broke free from the sand. The police, seeing him try to escape again, opened fire on the boat, aiming to disable the engine. And then, just as suddenly, Colton stood up with both hands in the air and shouted, "I want to surrender." The police immediately moved in and arrested him. After 2.5 years on the run, the Barefoot Bandit was finally in custody. When he was brought to the port, a crowd had gathered. Everyone wanted to see the thief who had eluded the American police and the FBI. Colton was taken into custody and sent from one island to another in the Bahamas for trial. The most surprising thing was that for all the thefts he committed in the Bahamas, even after being proven guilty, the court only fined him $300. Then it was time for him to be handed over to American police, where a long prison sentence was waiting. Colton's trial in America began in 2010. By the age of 19, he faced a total of 67 charges for crimes committed in America, Canada, and the Bahamas. Fortunately for Colton, a very famous lawyer named John Henry Brown agreed to take his case. This lawyer was renowned for winning even the most difficult cases. He was the same lawyer who had defended America's most famous serial killer, Ted Bundy. The lawyer's strategy was to have Colton confess to all the thefts, but to focus the judge's attention on Colton's tragic childhood. He argued that the immense troubles Colton faced and the neglect from his parents were the reasons that forced him into a life of crime. The judge listened to these arguments and took pity on Colton. After the jury deliberated, Colton was sentenced to 7 years in prison. After serving 5 years, he was released on parole at the age of 24. After his release from jail, he started working as an assistant in the very law office of the lawyer who had defended him. Colton later gave many interviews, in which he said he deeply regrets his past life. He stated that he is now very happy to be a good person and would never go back to that path again. This is the story of a boy who began his journey of crime at just 14 years old. He stole cars, boats, and even planes and escaped from detention centers. But in the end he chose to leave it all.